Back to the Greenbelt reversal. Let's go live now to NDP Leader Marit Stiles. Her reaction.
Across our province who care deeply about the Greenbelt and worked with the official opposition NDP to show that change is possible. So congratulations to everyone who's been fighting for our vital farmland and green space, who said no to cronyism and corruption in government. This is a victory for you. It's a victory for all Ontarians. But let's get real, because it never should have taken a series of scandals from this government for the Premier to undo the damage that he's done. It shouldn't have taken Mr. Ford and his ministers getting caught making shady backroom deals with speculators for Ford to do the right thing. It was clear from the beginning that this was the wrong decision. And yet, Mr. Ford and the Conservative government pressed on. It was a calculated attempt by this government to benefit a select few, Conservative insiders at the expense of everybody else. And people are struggling. They're struggling with a cost of living crisis. They're struggling with a housing crisis. Yes, it's very real. And Mr. Ford wasted people's time. He wasted people's time rather than implementing the actual solutions to the housing crisis, something that this Greenbelt grab was never about. This whole scandal has pulled back the curtain on a government that's all too comfortable making backroom deals. And I would say that Mr. Ford and his government have a lot more questions to answer. But for now, today is a real victory for Ontarians who demanded better, and their government was held to account. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions.
So the Premier has dug in on this issue for months. What do you think it was that finally led to this reversal, and why did it take so long?
Right. So, I think at the end of the day, that's an excellent question. The government and the Premier wasted months and months and dug in day after day. Even the more information that came out, the more they dug in, which I think gives you a sense and gave Ontarians a sense of how deeply they are dug into the scandal. And I think we still have a lot more questions that we need to answer. Certainly over the next few weeks, we have a government that has been absolutely complicit, and I'm going to continue to ask those questions. And in the meantime, I really do believe that the government's apology, for now, it's he's qualifying it. Like we teach our kindergartners, don't qualify your apologies. I want to see, I'm glad they're reversing this, but I don't trust them for a second until it's actually done. And I'm going to bring forward my legislation on Monday to make sure that we fully reverse their decision.
And what do you make of the Integrity Commissioner saying there's insufficient grounds to look into the wedding events around Ford? Are you going to be going back to the Integrity Commissioner with any further information on that?
We will continue. We certainly, as things come up, will continue to go to the Integrity Commissioner, bring issues to his attention. I think that today's report by the Integrity Commissioner shows one thing very clearly, that our ethics laws, our Integrity Act in this province are not strong enough. There are too many loopholes. The Integrity Commissioner said, the bar is very high, the threshold is very high to break those integrity laws. And I think Ontarians would probably agree that the bar needs to be low, right? If this is the kind of thing that a Premier can get away with, we found out in the Integrity Commissioner's report that the Premier's own chief of fundraising was actually collecting and selling tickets to some of the people who ended up benefiting from the Greenbelt grab for this family fundraiser. The Premier doesn't see anything wrong with that. I know a lot of Ontarians who do. So I think there's still many other questions to ask that remain unanswered, and I intend to continue to push as well to close those loopholes in the Integrity Act because Ontarians know that that's just not right.
Will you be making a complaint to the Integrity Commissioner about Khalid Rashid in the wake of his resignation and the
We
reporting?
are looking into that right now. We want to make sure we have everything together, but we're deeply concerned about what Mr. Khalid, of course, his resignation, what this means. I've brought forward. I have a lot of other questions that I think we're going to need answers to over the next few weeks. In particular, when did the Premier know what? Why did the Premier say that the boys, quote unquote, sold tickets to the family fundraiser, when in fact we know now that it was the Conservative chair of fundraising that did that? We have real estate speculators giving cash to a member of the Premier's family. We have a cabinet minister jetting off to Vegas for massages with Greenbelt developers. These are deeply concerning, and we're going to continue to ask questions.
Do you have any reaction to Mr. Ford confirming that his now former housing policy director, I guess, Jay Tredsdale, has resigned?
Again, every day there's another turn in this scandal. This doesn't end here. Who in the government tipped off developers? Why is Mr. Truesdale resigning? He is the Premier's Director of Housing Policy. What does he know? The Premier continues to refuse to share his phone records. We know that emails were deleted. That was something the Auditor General found. How much and when did the Premier know something, right? Who among the Premier's top aides were also involved? Because we know that some of his inner circle and closest advisors and aides were in Las Vegas with the former minister and with land speculators who were looking to and eventually would benefit from this Greenbelt grab. So I have a lot of questions, and some of them relate to the Premier, some of them relate to other members of his inner circle. I saw all of the cabinet ministers. What are there, like 29, 30 cabinet ministers now or something in this government? And they're all standing there with the Premier. And I'm thinking to myself, well, wait a minute. They're selling off our healthcare system, right? We really still have a housing crisis. We have MZOs that have been granted. We have a right to answers, and Ontarians have a right to trust the integrity and ethics of their government. So how deep does this corruption go?
Just looking ahead to next week, I'm wondering what more your party and the other opposition parties can actually do. I mean, the motion at the standing committee to hold hearings on this was voted down. You say you're going to introduce legislation next week, but you don't have the majority. The PCs do. That likely won't get through. So what else can you actually do?
Well, first of all, the legislation, the bill that I'm going to introduce on Monday, is a bill to reverse the Greenbelt grab. I can't think of any reason why the government wouldn't support such a straightforward piece of legislation. It's drafted, it's ready to go. Let's pass it. So I absolutely, if they want to reverse course, let's do it together. That's really, really important. Secondly, I'm going to use every opportunity I have to demand answers from the government to some of the questions I've raised today. Who in the government tipped off the developers in this Greenbelt grab? What did the Premier know and when? Why did the housing policy lead for the Premier resign today? What did he know? Who else was in Las Vegas with the developers and the minister? I mean, there's endless questions here. And I will tell you, as I go across the province, people, and I want to say again, I mean, this is an important day for Ontarians who fought very, very hard to get this government to reverse their decision to carve up the Greenbelt. This will mean a lot to a lot of people, and it's an extraordinary victory for Ontarians. But I think that as I went around the province, what I heard as well very clearly from Ontarians is that how did we get here? What was it? Because nobody out there believes that it was suddenly the Premier woke up in his government one day and said, oh, there's a housing crisis. We've been raising the alarm about a housing crisis for a decade, right? It's gotten really bad, but it didn't just start overnight after the 2022 election. Suddenly, it's been coming. And so why did all of a sudden he decide to to lie to Ontarians again and then reverse his decision and move forward with the Greenbelt grab. And a lot of very wealthy insiders with connections to the premier and his inner circle benefited. You know, I've said it before and I'll say it again, smacks of corruption and collusion, not good enough. We need to do better in this province, and we're going to get to the bottom of it.
Be expecting the PC caucus to be voting in favor of that bill on Monday?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I was disappointed that the premier didn't just say right off the bat, you know what, we're going to be supporting the opposition leader's bill because it's the right thing to do. It's going to be simple and straightforward, and it's going to, and I'll tell you why it's important. Because we want to make sure this is done properly. That legislation has to go. We have to reverse the legislation. We have to make sure that the land is properly returned and that they can't sneak in and carve it up again. I want to make sure it's done, and I want to make sure that we have. And I don't trust. I will be honest. You know, Mr. Ford has lied to Ontarians before, so I would like to see him do the right thing here and just support our legislation.
We have callers on the line.
Okay.
Next question will be from Randy Rath at CHCH TV. Please go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, hi, Mark. I'm just wondering, during the press conference today, Mr. Ford was presented, somebody said to him, you know, this is the worst scandal in Ontario's political history. It's worse than the Liberals' gas plant scandal. And he said, no, it's not, because there was no public money spent here. Do you buy that? There had to be a ton of public money spent just in the time that staffers worked on this.
I can't imagine that Ontarians sit around going, was it private? Was it public? It was corruption, period. They colluded to benefit a few insiders, very wealthy insiders, very connected to the Conservative Party of Ed Ford. And so he can try to say that it's not as bad as whatever. We had 2 senior cabinet ministers resign in just a couple of weeks. That is, I think, pretty unprecedented in the province of Ontario. And, you know, we have a premier who just simply will never do the right thing until he's caught. So I honestly think, you know, he should just, again, you know, we learn this with our kids. We teach our kids this very early on. Don't qualify your apology. If you're going to make an apology, own it.
How far behind do you think this has put Ontario in building the needed housing? I mean, you know, has there been a year wasted here?
Well, it's been at least a year wasted in addressing the housing affordability crisis in this province, without question. I would say even longer, because it sounds to me like the premier just woke up suddenly after the 2022 election and recognized that there was a housing crisis, when Ontarians have been feeling it for a whole lot longer than that. And experts and the official opposition have been saying and warning that this was coming for many years. I mean, people have been living this. So I'm really concerned that the government will continue to use these issues as an excuse to not really address the actual crisis, which is an affordability crisis. It's a crisis in housing affordability, and the government has to get actually down, roll up their sleeves, sit down with municipalities, sit down with non-governmental organizations, sit down with communities, and actually start building some housing. And the government needs to start actually being involved directly in building the housing themselves.
On his actions in the election, that's sort of his answer to what consequences he should personally bear for this. Do you think that leaving it up to voters in 2.5 years is sufficient?
Well, I mean, I would say, first of all, yes, he will be answerable to the voters of this province in 2026. But he also has to, I would say, come clean with Ontarians. We Ontarians want to know, people want to know what he knew and when, how deeply he was involved in this scandal. I'm hearing from people when I go across this province that they're not satisfied with his answers about this. They're not satisfied that he didn't know anything. And we saw references in the Auditor General's report, in the Integrity Commissioner's report, that seemed to indicate that he was, quite directly implicated. So I think until he is willing to truly come clean and share his phone records, tell us what was in those emails that were deleted, Ontarians are going to continue to have questions, and it's not going to be enough to just wait and see what happens in 2026. We need and we deserve a government that has more integrity than this, that doesn't lie to people, that doesn't take away their treasured Greenbelt or the things that matter to Ontarians. He's proposing some very significant changes in this province, including the privatization of healthcare. Can Ontarians trust him with that? I doubt it. So I really think that that Ontarians aren't going to be satisfied to wait until 2026 to give the Premier a piece of their mind, and he's going to have to go further. He's going to have to truly come clean with Ontarians.
How confident are you that this is going to be an election issue in 2026? It's a long time from now, and they seem to be hoping that people will forget or move on. Do you think that's likely?
Well, in my experience, the electorate has a very long memory. Look at what he himself today raised the gas plant scandal for the Liberals, right? People remember, and it leaves a terrible smell on a government that's going to linger for some time. And what he did today will not close the curtains on the questions that people have in this province.
No further questions from the teleconference.
Okay, thank you very much.